as well. Siding a house is free. It doesn't cost anything extra, and it makes a lot of difference in how much energy you use. So just in terms of design, siding, and orientation, I want to show you some examples. They come from Charlemont. We pass them on Route 2 as we go back and forth between here and Williamstown. This is an 18th century house. The 2 stories of glazing are facing the south. Plenty of windows on the east because they are on the east side of that mountain that we are on the west side of, and so they have less glazing on the west side. And then when they added an addition, notice that it's only about 12 feet wide, and it's pushed back so it can also get the sunlight during the day. In addition to that, Bill, if you give me the next slide, here's a New England salt box, also a very good design for the New England climate. 2 stories of glazing on the south side, only 1 story of glazing on the north side. You primarily use the back of the house or the north side there for storage, closets, and that type of thing, stairwells, whatever. And we did exactly the same thing in our house. In addition to that, they often placed buildings on the north, northeast, northwest side, depending upon the prevailing winds, to further protect the house. And we used that concept as well in our house, in the sense that we had both a detached garage and shed on the northwest corner of the house to shelter it from the winds. We did not put it on top of the hill. We built it into a hillside. You will not notice people in the 18th and 19th century perching their houses on top of hills. It's a very windy place, and you need a lot more energy to keep it warm.
Okay, another thing, going back even before the 17th century, is celestial mechanics, and I think Thoreau would have appreciated that. You know, you remember the Copernican revolution, right? It failed because the sun still rises every morning. We don't say the earth turned, right, and the sun appeared, the sun rises. So I'm going to use that pre-Copernican language because that's what we all use, but it's kind of a sad thing that the Copernican revolution never really caught on. And so here's the situation, you know, every day, every December 21st, the sun is at the same place in the sky relative to where your house is. And so if you design your house properly so that the sun can penetrate into the house in December, you can get some extra warming from that. And we estimate we're probably getting about 20 or 25% of the winter warming of our house from passive solar gain. But in June, you don't want that coming in because your house will overheat. And so but again, celestial mechanics comes to the rescue, and the sun is always in the same place. It's much higher in the sky, and you can calculate exactly the size of that roof overhang that you need in order to make sure that the sun doesn't come in the sunniest part of the summer. The next one, please. So these are all just some of the specifications of the way we built the house. We oriented it right, we built the overhangs right, and we had a lot of help in this, by the way. The walls are R43. What R1 is a single pane of glass, right? And the ceilings are R50, some places R60, so really lots of insulation. We have 12-inch thick walls. If you look at standard walls that are supposed to be R14, that is a 2x4 wall, they're typically R7 when you actually measure them because the studs go all the way through, and wood is actually a better conductor, obviously, than the insulation, and you get this rather poor performance of the whole wall. Ours, as you'll see, is designed in a different way. Typical, if you get good American-made windows, double pane, they're about R3. That wasn't good enough for the design of this house, so we said, well, where are we going to get good windows that are good enough? And it turns out there's this country to the north of us that's colder than we are, right? And at the time, 3 years ago, when we started this house, the Canadian dollar was not worth as much as the American dollar. That's no longer true, unfortunately. So we found 4 Canadian companies that made these wonderful fiberglass windows that were really efficient, R5, and worked very well. There's now a new American company that is basically a Canadian company that's now making these efficient windows in the United States. They're made out in Colorado. And R7 doors, those are very efficient, and ultra-low air infiltration. Now, I suspect there are people in this room who live in wonderful old homes in the Concord area. And we used to live in a wonderful old home in the suburbs of Boston, in Arlington. And, you know, I don't know how in colonial times they got away with candles, because our candles just sort of go like this and then drip tallow all over everything, right? And yet that's all they had. You know, breezy. And then, you know, when the first oil shocks came, we began tightening up houses and everybody got sick building syndrome. Because we didn't also then think, well, maybe we shouldn't put the things in the houses that we have which give off these gases, which the drafty, leaky windows and doors and cracks in the walls were letting the air blow through and blow away. So it's a total integrated process. You got to think about what's in the house, and if you're going to really tighten it up, you have to ventilate it properly with a mechanical ventilator, and you have to make sure you don't have things that outgas nasty things. So our house is designed to be very ultra-low leakage. It's about 1/5 the leakage rate of a standard house. ELA means effective leakage area, 20 square inches. In a code-built house today, it's about 120 square inches. It's as though you have a hole in your wall, it's 120 square inches. And in some of the older homes that have not really been dealt with this way, you've probably got, you know, I don't know, 300-400 square inches of hole in the wall, basically, from the leakage. Okay, now, there's this great romanticism about log cabins, right? Who does not love a log cabin? They're such a part of American culture and so forth, but they're really inefficient. I mean, those logs are just conducting heat right out of this place. They are not good insulators. Wood is not a good insulator, it turns out. And so those are solid, inefficient walls. And in the next slide, I'll show you some light, super efficient walls. This is what was constructed for our house. Here it is under construction. And here's a close-up on the next slide. The 2x4s, which hold up, which are the bearing walls, are built, and then a layer of, on the inside. They're built on the inside. And then these fins, these 8-inch fins called Larson trusses, just stick out from the wall, and they're very insubstantial. That's a piece of, just a little piece of plastic in between there and very little wood, so there's very little conduction of heat through this. And then you put another piece of plywood or strand board on the outside of that, and then you fill those pockets with insulation. So all these are pockets of insulation wrapping the house, an 8-inch thick insulating layer going all around the house. Next, please. This is the insulation we chose was cellulose, which is basically recycled newspaper, which our engineer, Mark Rosenbaum, says is clearly the highest and best use of newspaper, right? Now, I apologize to the Boston Globe who's here for making that comment, but that was the comment that was made. So anyway, it's a very good use of newspaper, once you've read it, of course, after you've read it. In addition, here's a problem. You have rafters, but rafters conduct heat from the inside to the outside. So you need to have insulating board between the ceiling and the rafters, and this is just a picture of some of that. And next is just a diagram showing, you can see the double wall construction there with 12 inches of insulation. You see the trusses holding up these little pockets of insulation, then another 2x4's worth of insulation, and then you can see the pink insulating board. And then, I guess you can't see it, but there's a little red line that runs all the way through there, which is this continuous plastic sheet. I mean, the whole house is shrink wrapped in order to be tight. And then you have to instruct every carpenter and every plumber that they cut into that under penalty of death. Because the house will not perform and meet its standards if that is cut. Needless to say, there is not a carpenter, nor a plumber, nor an electrician who ever saw a vapor barrier that he did not want to cut into.